I came home exhausted, my body moving on autopilot after another brutal day at work. The office had been relentless, endless emails, meetings that could have been emails, and a boss who acted like breathing on company time was a privilege. All I wanted was to kick off my shoes, grab a beer, and melt into my couch while something mindless played on TV. But the second I reached my door, something felt wrong. It was open. Not wide open, but just enough to send a wave of icy dread through my chest. I was meticulous about locking my door. Living in New York, you had to be. My hand hovered over the handle as my mind scrambled for a reasonable explanation. Had maintenance come by? A package left inside by the super? My pulse pounded in my ears as I nudged the door open. And then I saw him. A man, someone I had never seen before, was sprawled on my couch, legs stretched out like he belonged there. He had one arm slung over the backrest, the other holding a beer. My beer. From my fridge. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. Maybe I was in the wrong apartment? No. This was my place. My framed print of the Brooklyn skyline was still hanging slightly crooked above the TV. My worn-out sneakers were still by the door. Then the guy turned his head lazily, meeting my eyes like I was the one who had just barged in. Can I help you? I managed, my voice tight. He raised an eyebrow, tilting the beer bottle toward me in a casual salute. I should be asking you that. The absurdity of the situation made me bark out a laugh. A short, humorless sound. Yeah, no. See, this is my apartment. I took a step inside, my muscles tensed, ready to fight if I had to. So you want to tell me who the hell you were before I call the cops? The guy exhaled through his nose, like this was mildly inconvenient for him at best. He reached for a folder sitting on the coffee table and tossed it toward me. Check it yourself. I caught it, my fingers numb as I flipped it open, and my stomach plummeted. It was a purchase agreement. For my apartment. Signed. Stamped. Notarized. And my name wasn't anywhere on it. I forced myself to breathe, flipping through the pages, scanning for some clue that this was a mistake. But there it was, plain as day, someone else's name on the deed. I swallowed hard. This has to be a mistake. The man, who was apparently not a squatter, shrugged, setting his beer down. That's what I thought at first, too. But I've got the keys, the deed, and a very expensive mortgage now, so. He spread his hands. Looks like this place belongs to me. No. This couldn't be happening. I yanked my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I scrolled to my real estate agent's number. The one who had sold me this place a year ago. The line rang. And rang. Then, we're sorry, the number you were trying to reach is no longer in service. My stomach twisted. I tried again. Same result. I could feel the guy watching me, waiting for me to piece it together. Panic clawed at my throat as I scrolled further down my contacts and called my landlord. He picked up on the second ring. Mr. Parker. It's Jason Reynolds. Listen, there's been some sort of mistake. There's a man in my apartment claiming he owns it. A pause. Then, in a slow, careful voice, Parker said, Jason, we sold that unit 2 weeks ago. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming short. No. You sold it to me last year. I have the contract, the emails, everything. We didn't sell it to you, he interrupted. We sold it to your representative. The world tilted. My what? Your representative. The man who handled the transaction on your behalf. Nicholas Reynolds. For a moment, everything inside me went still. Then the rage came, hot and blinding. Nicholas. My brother. The same brother I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. And now he had stolen my home. I stood there, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached. Nicholas. Of course it was him. I should have seen it coming. I should have known. The last time we spoke, 3 years ago, he had already burned every bridge between us. And yet, somehow, I had been stupid enough to leave him with the one thing he could use to destroy me. My chest tightened, my breath coming short and shallow. Jason. Parker's voice crackled through the phone. I forced myself to swallow, to push down the red-hot rage clawing at my throat. You're telling me my brother sold my apartment? He was your legal representative, Parker said, his tone shifting to something almost apologetic. The paperwork was all in order. He had power of attorney over the property, so legally, yeah, it was his to sell. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. Power of attorney. My free hand dug into my hair as realization slammed into me like a truck. 3 years ago, I had been buying this apartment while traveling for work, drowning in paperwork, barely keeping my head above water. Nicholas had been family, and at the time, despite everything, I had thought, just for a second, that I could trust him with one thing. So I had given him temporary power of attorney, just to make things easier. And then I had forgotten to revoke it. And now, I was paying for that mistake. I sucked in a shaky breath. How much did he sell it for? A pause. Then Parker cleared his throat. Well, a little under market value. Of course he had. Nicholas didn't care about the money. He cared about screwing me over. I ended the call before I could say something I'd regret. The new owner, Lucas, according to the paperwork, watched me carefully from the couch, his expression somewhere between sympathy and discomfort. Like he knew this was messed up, but also wasn't about to give up the place he had just bought. And honestly, I didn't blame him. Look, man, he said, setting his beer down. I get that this sucks, but I didn't scam you. I bought this place legally. If you want to fight it, you're going to have to take it to court. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling slowly. I had nothing to say to him, because he was right. So I turned and walked out, my body moving on autopilot. By the time I reached the street, my pulse was still hammering, my skin burning from the cold air. The city buzzed around me, horns blaring, people laughing, the distant wail of a siren, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Nicholas had taken everything, not just my apartment. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app with shaking fingers. A second later, my stomach dropped. Zero. A flat, mocking zero. My savings. My emergency fund. Every cent I had worked my ass off for gone. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at my screen, my breath fogging in the air. Nicholas had left me with nothing. Again. And this time, I wasn't letting it slide. I didn't remember how long I walked. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. The cold seeped through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My mind was stuck in a loop, replaying the moment Parker said his name. Nicholas. The last time I saw my brother, it was in a hospital waiting room. Our mother had just died. I had been drowning in grief, barely able to process anything, and Nicholas had been talking about money. Specifically, her money. He had wanted to contest the will. Said it wasn't fair that I got more, even though Mom knew he'd blow through every cent. I told him to leave it alone, that we could split it, that it wasn't worth fighting over. He didn't listen. By the time the lawyers got involved, Nicholas had already spent his half and was trying to claw into mine. That was when I cut him off. No more calls. No more bailouts. No more brother. And now he had done this. My feet stopped in front of a familiar corner before my brain even caught up. The bar. Our bar. The place we used to go to after work, before everything turned to shit. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. Of course. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to his number. It was still there, even after 3 years. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I hit call. The line rang once. Twice. Then, Jason. His voice. Smooth, casual. Like we were just two brothers catching up. My grip on the phone tightened. Where are you? A pause. I was wondering when you'd call. I clenched my jaw. Don't play games, Nicholas. Where are you? Another pause. Then a quiet chuckle. Same place as always. You know where to find me. The line went dead. I stood there, my breath fogging in the cold night air, fingers still wrapped around my useless phone. I didn't know where to find him. And if he thought I was just going to roll over and take this, he was dead wrong. I found him exactly where I knew he'd be. A rooftop bar in Brooklyn, one of those overpriced places with dim lighting, craft cocktails, and a view of the skyline that made people forget how miserable their lives actually were. Nicholas always liked places like this. Somewhere he could play the role of the charming, successful guy. Somewhere he could pretend he hadn't burned every bridge behind him. And there he was, sitting in a corner booth, nursing a glass of whiskey, looking as put together as ever. Polished suit. Expensive watch. That same smug look he always wore, like the world was a game only he knew how to win. When he saw me, he grinned. Jason, he said, leaning back against the booth like we were old friends. That was fast. I didn't sit. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to grab him by the collar, drag him across the table, and demand to know how the hell he could do this to me. Instead, I gritted my teeth and said, why? He exhaled, taking a slow sip of his drink. Why what? I slammed my hands on the table, rattling the glass. Don't play dumb. You stole my home, my money, everything. What? Nicholas sighed, rubbing his jaw like I was the one exhausting him. Look, man, it's not personal. A sharp, humorless laugh tore out of my throat. Not personal? Are you serious? He shrugged. It was an opportunity. I took it. I stared at him, barely breathing. An opportunity. That was all I was to him. Not a brother. Not family. Just another mark. My hands curled into fists. You ruined me, Nicholas. He waved a hand. You'll bounce back. You always do. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed his whiskey and hurled it across the bar. The glass shattered against the floor, amber liquid splattering across the tile. Heads turned. The bartender stiffened. Nicholas let out a slow breath, closing his eyes for a second, like he was counting to 10. You done? No, I snarled. Not even close. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Nicholas never felt guilt, but something close to amusement. All right, he said, adjusting his cuffs. Let's get it out of your system, then. Go ahead. Say whatever you need to say. I stared at him. Say whatever I needed to say? Where the hell was I supposed to start? Maybe with the fact that I had spent years looking out for him. That when our parents died, I was the one who made sure he had a roof over his head. That when he screwed up, over and over again, I was the idiot who kept giving him chances. And now he had taken the last thing I had left. I swallowed the rage burning in my throat. Was it worth it? Nicholas tilted his head. What? Whatever you got for selling my apartment. My savings. The scam you pulled. Was it worth it? He smirked. Time will tell. I exhaled sharply through my nose. I'm going to fix this. And when I do, I swear to God, you will regret it. Nicholas chuckled, shaking his head. Jason, come on. We both know that's not true. I leaned in, my voice low and sharp. Watch me. Then I turned and walked out. Because I would fix this. Even if it killed me. I barely remembered how I got back to the motel. The cheap room smelled like stale smoke and bad decisions, but I barely noticed. My mind was still spinning, replaying every second of that conversation with Nicholas. His smug face. His lazy smirk. The way he had shrugged off my entire life like it was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. It wasn't personal. It was an opportunity. I dropped onto the edge of the bed, running a hand down my face, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. I had nothing. No apartment. No money. No way to fight back. Except, that wasn't true, was it? Nicholas might have stolen from me, but he wasn't smart enough to do it alone. He always had someone else pulling the strings, someone covering his tracks when things got messy. I grabbed my laptop, fingers moving fast over the keys. If there was even one mistake in the paperwork, one forged signature, one falsified document, I could rip his entire scheme apart. It didn't take long to find something. An old email from my real estate agent, confirming the purchase a year ago. At first glance, it was standard. Just the usual legal jargon. But then I noticed something. A second signature. Not mine. I copied the name and ran a search. And just like that, everything clicked. The notary. The same notary who had approved the sale of my apartment under Nicholas's name. A guy with a history of fraud charges. My breath came fast as I leaned back, my pulse hammering. That was it. That was my way out. I grabbed my phone and called the only lawyer I still trusted. Jason. His voice was groggy. Do you know what time it is? I don't care, I said. I need you to check something for me. A sigh, then the sound of papers shuffling. All right. What's the name? I gave it to him. 15 minutes later, he called me back. You were right, he said. This guy's been flagged before for falsifying documents. Small stuff, nothing big enough to put him away, but enough to make a case. I gripped the phone tighter. Can we prove it? A pause. Then, yeah, I think we can. I exhaled slowly, my chest tightening with something close to relief. Finally, I had something real. Something I could use to burn Nicholas to the ground. It took a week. A week of legal calls, paperwork, and sleepless nights. But then came the hearing. I sat in the courtroom, my hands clenched in my lap as Nicholas walked in, looking as polished as ever. He had that same smug confidence, the same lazy arrogance in his step. Until he saw the evidence lined up against him. The forged documents. The fraudulent signatures. The notary testifying against him to save his own ass. For the first time in years, I saw something crack in Nicholas's expression. Panic. And it was glorious. The judge ruled in my favor. The apartment was mine again. Nicholas was charged with fraud. And just like that, the man who had spent his life stepping on everyone around him. Finally, had to face the consequences. I got the apartment back. The money? That was gone. Nicholas had burned through it, and I knew I'd never see a cent. But I didn't care. because for the first time in years, I had one. And Nicholas? He was left with nothing.